Question number 48. A laser beam shines along a block of transparent material of length 2.5 meter. Part of the beam goes to the detector D1 while the other part travels through the block and then hits the detector D2. The time delay between the arrivals of the two light beams is inferred to be 6.25 nanosecond. The speed of light is c equal to 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second. The refractive index of the block is, we have to find out the refractive index of the block and round off to 2 decimal places. So the laser beam shines along a block of transparent material. So this is our laser. One part goes directly to D1, the detector, and another part goes to the detector D2 through a block of transparent material. We have to find out the refractive index of this block. So generally the formula is n equal to c by v, where c is the velocity of light in vacuum and v is the velocity of the same light in that medium. So we need to find out the velocity of the laser beam within that block, and we are given the time delay between the arrivals of the two light beams. That means when the detector is hitting, when the light is hitting the detector D1 and when the light is hitting the detector D2, there is a time difference. So for detector D1, we can use S equal to Vt. So S is the distance of the detector from laser beam. V is the velocity of the laser when it is going to hit the detector, and Td1 is the time taken by the laser light to reach the detector. So here it is 2.5 meter given. Velocity of the laser beam is nothing but 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second, and the time Td1. So the Td1 is given by 2.5 divided by 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second, and that is converted into nanosecond. That means 2.5 times 10 to the power minus 9 times 10 divided by 3. That gives us 8.33 nanosecond. So the laser takes 8.33 nanosecond to reach the detector D1 in air. For detector D2, time delay is 6.259 seconds. That means the total time taken by the laser in reaching the detector D2 through the transparent block is 8.33. That is the time taken in air plus that time delay, which is 6.25 nanosecond. So that gives us 14.58 nanosecond. So same formula we will use. This time S D2 is equal to V D2 times T D2. So again, the distance S is 2.5 meter. We have to find out the velocity of the laser light through the transparent block times the time taken, which is 14.58 nanosecond. That gives us 2.5 meter divided by 14.58 nanosecond. That gives me 2.5 times 10 to the power 9 by 14.58 meter per second. So we got the velocity of the laser light through the transparent block. Now we are going to use the formula n equal to cv. So here v is the velocity of the laser light through the transparent block and when it is going to hit the detector D2. So v D2 is equal to v glass, we can write, that is the velocity through the glass. C is the 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second. V D2 is 2.5 times 10 to the power 9 divided by 14.58 meter per second. So if I do the calculation, we get 43.74 divided by 25. that is equal to 1.749, and round off to 2 decimal places gives me 1.75. Therefore, refractive index of the block is 1.75. Next problem, question number 49. An ideal black body at temperature T emits radiation of energy density U. The corresponding value for a material at temperature T by 2 is U by 256. Its emissivity is, we have to find out the emissivity, and answer should be round up to 3 decimal places. Now, in the case of ideal black body, we know U equal to sigma A E times T to the power 4, where E is the emissivity of an ideal black body, which is 1. Sigma is Stefan's constant, T is temperature. We can write A, or if you divide U by A, it's the same. Okay. Now, the corresponding value for a material at T by 2, corresponding value is U by 256. That means U by 256 is equal to sigma A metal times E metal times T by 2 to the power 4. Now, as we said, corresponding value for a material, so we can say the area same. So A metal is nothing but A. That means area of the metal body is equal to the area of the ideal black body. So if we divide 2 by 1, we get U by 256 by U, that is equal to sigma A metal times E metal times T by 2 to the power 4 divided by sigma A E T to the power 4. That gives us 1 by 256 E metal by T to the power 2 to the power 4. And therefore, E metal is equal to 16 by 256, which gives us 0.062 up to 3 decimal places. So, the emissivity of that metal is approximately 0.06. Next problem, question 40. A particle of mass m is in an infinite square well potential of length L. Infinite square well potential. It is in a superposed state of the first 2 energy eigenstates as given by psi x equal to 1 by root 3, psi n equal to 1x plus under root 2 by 3, psi n equals to 2x. Identify the correct statements. H is Planck's constant. So here psi is not time dependent. It is just position function of x. So do not need to worry about the time dependent part. And the potential OL is, we can write x equal to 0 to x equal to L, the width, and we have infinite potential at the boundary. And the particle is inside this potential OL. So we know for a particle in an infinite square well potential of length L, the energy eigenvalues are given by n square pi square h square by twice ml square. We know that. And the corresponding wave function sin nothing but 2 by L sin n pi x by L. So for n equal to 1, we have E1 is equal to pi square h square by twice ml square. Psi n equal to 1x gives me square root 2 by L sin pi x by L. For n equal to 2, we have E2 equals to 2 square pi square h square by twice ml square. That gives me 4 pi square h cross square by twice ml square. And psi n2x is nothing but square root of 2 by L sin 2 pi x by L. So we know all these things. Now we are given psi x equal to 1 by root 3 psi x plus under root 2 by 3 psi x. First check whether it is normalized or not. So we take the bracket we use the bracket notation and find out that the dot product is 1. That means psi x is normalized. We can also write psi x as psi x equal to C1 psi n1x plus C2 psi n2x, where C1 is equal to 1 by root 3 and C2 is equal to a square root of 2 by 3. Therefore, C1 square plus C2 square should give us 1. That again signifies that psi x is normalized. So either we can take the bracket dot product, or we can use that C1 square plus C2 square equal to 1 to find out whether the psi x is normalized or not. So basically C1 square is the probability of finding the system in the state n equal to 1, and C2 square is the probability of finding the system in a state n equal to 2. We know that. So C square basically the probability of finding the system in a particular state. So therefore, expectation value or average value of E can be written as 1 by root 3 square E n1, value of E for n equal to 1, plus the square root of 2 by 3 whole square, and E for n equal to 2. So if I use the values of E for n equal to 1 and E for n equal to 2 and do the simple calculation, I finally get 9 by 3 pi square a square by twice ml square. Now the answer is given in terms of h, so you have to convert h cross into h, which is h cross is equal to h by 2 pi, and putting the value of h cross, so h by 2 pi square, that gives me 3h square by 8 ml square. So expectation value of E is equal to 3h square by 8 ml square. So option C is correct. Option B, 0. Uncertainty in X. Impossible, because the particle is confined in a potential well of width L. The particle must be somewhere between 0 and L. Also, from uncertainty principle, we know that delta X, delta P must be greater than equal to h cross by 2. Therefore, delta X cannot be 0. So therefore, D is incorrect. Option A, expectation value of P is 0 given. Yes, it is correct because the particle is moving back and forth between the two walls. So therefore, average value of momentum will be 0. Next, we are asked option B is correct or not. So delta P, uncertainty in momentum, is given by, we know that square root of average of P square minus square of average. So P average is 0. So that portion is 0. Now we know E equal to P square by 2m. Therefore, average value of E is equal to average value of P square by 2m. So P square average is equal to 2m average E. We know average E, which is 3h square by 8 ml square. Putting that value gives us average of P square 3h square by 4l square. So putting that value over here, we get delta P is equal to square root of average of P square, which is under root 3h square by 4l square. That gives me root 3h by twice l. And option B tells that delta P is equal to root 3h by twice l. So option B is correct. Question number 43. A small conducting square loop of side small l is placed inside a concentric large conducting square loop of side capital L. Capital L is larger than small l. The value of mutual inductance of the system is expressed as mu 0 in small l square by pi capital L. the value of n is, we have to find out the value of n and should round off it to 2 decimal places. So actually, this is the picture, a bigger loop of side capital L, and inside it there is a small square loop of side small l. They are concentric. The mutual inductance between these two loops is given, and we have to find out that number n. So here we are going to use the Biot-Savart law. So according to the Biot-Savart law, magnetic field due to the current in a straight wire of finite length is B equals to mu 0 I by 4 pi r times sine theta 1 plus sine theta 2. And that picture is shown over here. So current I is flowing through a finite length where straight where we want to calculate the magnetic field B at point P, which is at a distance r. The point P makes angle theta 1 and theta 2 with the two ends of the wire. So this is the formula for calculating the Biot-Savart, calculating magnetic field at point P using Biot-Savart law. This is easy to remember because for an infinitely long wire, theta 1 is equal to theta 2, that is equal to pi by 2. So B is equal to mu 0 I by 2 pi r. That is exactly Ampere's circuital law gives us. So in this problem, our theta 1 and theta 2 are same and the value is 45 degree, as we can see from here, because it is a square loop and inside the square loop there is a small loop, and we have to find out the magnetic field at the point P, and the point P is making angle theta 1 and theta 2 with the two ends of one of the segments. So this is our one segment. So B at P is given by mu 0 I by 4 pi r sine theta 1 plus sine theta 2. Here r is the distance of the point P from this line segment. So this r is nothing but half of capital L, that is L by 2. So therefore we have B is equal to mu 0 I by 4 pi times L by 2 times sine 45 degree plus sine 45 degree. That gives us mu 0 I by 2 pi L 1 plus 1 by root 2 plus 1 by root 2. That gives us mu 0 I by root 2 pi L. So this is due to one current segment of length L. So total we have 4 sides. So therefore B total will be 4 times mu 0 I by root 2 pi L. That gives us 4 mu 0 I by root 2 pi L. So this is due to all segments of length L. Now the flux, the magnetic flux is given by magnetic field times the area. This area is the area of the smaller loop, which is L square. And also we know the magnetic flux is equal to mutual inductance M times the current I. Therefore, from these two expressions, phi equal to B total times A and phi is equal to Mi, we can write B total times A is equal to Mi. B total is given 4 mu 0 I by root 2 pi L times L square is equal to M is given N mu naught L square by pi L times I. That gives us N equal to 4 by root 2, that is equal to 2.82. So N is equal to 2.82 and it is round off to 2 decimal places. Next problem, question number 56. A current I is uniformly distributed across a long straight non-magnetic wire where mu r is equal to 1 of circular cross section with radius a. 2 points P and Q are at distances a by 3 and 9 by a respectively from the axis of the wire. The ratio of the magnetic fields at points P and Q is, we have to find out the answer. Here mu r is nothing but mu by mu naught, which is equal to 1. Therefore, we can use mu equals to mu naught. Mu is for inside the material and mu naught is for air. But here, since mu r is equal to 1, therefore we can use mu is equal to mu naught. Now, as the problem says that 1 point is inside the wire because a by 3 and 1 point which is at 9a is outside of the wire. So we have to find out magnetic field at these 2 points and find out the ratio. So what we are going to do, we are going to use Ampere's circuitry law. So at point Q, which is at distance r from the axis of the wire, so B dot dl is equal to mu 0 I enclosed, where I enclosed is the current enclosed by this Amperian loop, which is this green loop through the point Q, which is at 9a, that means greater than radius a or outside of the wire. So B dot dl is equal to mu 0 I enclosed. That gives us B times 2 pi r integration of dl. dl is the line element or length element. That is equal to mu 0 I enclosed. Here r is 9a. So putting the value of r, we have B times 2 pi 9a is equal to mu 0 I enclosed. Therefore, B is equal to mu 0 I enclosed by 18 pi a. Now, I enclosed is nothing but the current flowing through the wire. So, therefore, magnetic field at the point Q is equal to mu 0 I by 18 pi a. Now, the problem says that current I is uniformly distributed across a long straight non-magnetic wire. So in that case, we can calculate the current density J, which is equal to current by area, cross-sectional area, which is pi a square. So this is the current density. So for point inside the wire, that means when the point is at R and that distance R is inside, that means R is smaller than the radius of the wire. So I enclosed will be pi R square J. Therefore, I enclosed is equal to pi R square. J is capital I by pi a square. That gives us R square by a square I. So this is the current enclosed by a Amperian loop inside the wire through the point P. So this red loop is that Amperian loop. And the point P is inside the wire. Again, we have to use Ampere's circuital law for the point R smaller than A. So we have B dot dl is equal to mu naught I enclosed. We can write mu naught since mu is equal to mu naught. We already got it. Therefore, B times integration of dl gives me 2 pi r is equal to mu 0 I enclosed is given by this value. So mu naught R square by a square times I, that gives us B is equal to mu 0 R by 2 pi a square I. This is for inside the wire. Now that R is given as A by 3, so therefore B at point P is given by mu 0 A by 3 divided by 2 pi a square times I. That gives us BP is equal to mu 0 I by 6 pi a, where P is inside the wire. Therefore, the ratio BP by BQ is equal to mu 0 I by 6 pi a divided by mu 0 I by 18 pi a. That gives us 18 by 6, that is equal to 3. So the ratio is 3. We can see how the magnetic field varies with distance R. Inside the wire, you can see B is equal to mu 0 R by 2 pi a square I. So B is proportional to R. Outside wire, if we look at it here, so B is equal to mu 0 by 2 pi R I enclosed. So B is proportional to 1 by R. So inside the wire, B increases and it reaches a maximum value at R is when R is equal to A. That means when the distance is equal to the radius of the wire, and that value we can calculate by putting R is equal to A in this expression. So mu 0 A by 2 pi a square I, that gives us mu 0 I by 2 pi a. So this is that value when we have R is equal to A. And then from the radius surface, the magnetic field decreases as a function of 1 upon R. So variation of B with R, B is proportional to R for R is smaller than A. That means when it is inside the wire, and B is proportional to 1 upon R when R is greater than A. Question number 51. Consider a hemispherical glass lens. Refractive index is 1.5, having radius of curvature 12 centimeter for the curved surface. An incoming ray parallel to the optical axis is incident on the curved surface at height h equal to 1 centimeter above the optical axis as shown in the figure. The distance d from the flat surface of the lens at which the ray crosses the optical axis is, we have to find out the value and round off it to 2 decimal places. So basically, this is our curved surface and this is our flat surface. Radius of curvature of the curved surface is r. We have N1 refractive index. This is for air. N2 is the refractive index of the glass. And again, when the ray comes out of the system, it comes to the air, which has refractive index again N1. Now, we know that for a spherical refracting surface, N1 by P plus N2 by I is equal to N2 minus N1 by R. P is the object distance, I image distance, R radius of curvature, N1 refractive index of medium 1 and N2 refractive index of medium 2. For curved surface, we are considering P1, which is infinite because the rays are parallel to the optic axis. That means the object is at infinite distance, because we know that when rays are coming from infinite object located at infinite location, the rays are assumed to be parallel to the optic axis. So here, as it is given, the ray is parallel to the optic axis. Therefore, we can easily say that our object is located at infinite location, infinite distance. N1 is the refractive index of air, which is 1, and N2 is the refractive index of the glass, which is 1.5. We are using P1 I1 for the curved surface and P2 I2 for the flat surface to distinguish them. So N1 by P1 plus N2 by I1 is equal to N2 minus N1 by R. P1 is infinite, so that gives me 0. N2 is 1.5 by I1 is equal to N2 minus N1, which is 0.5 divided by R, that is the radius of curvature, which is 12 centimeter. Therefore, I1 is 36 centimeter. Now, this is for curved surface. For flat surface, our object distance is now I1 minus R, because this I1 for curved surface is now acting as an object for the flat surface, and for the flat surface we have to subtract the radius of curvature, so which is 12. So therefore I1 minus R is equal to 36 minus 12, that gives me 24 centimeter. So this is my now object position. Again, we are going to use the same formula. N1 by P plus N2 by I is equal to N2 minus N1 by R. Now our N1 is the glass, refractive index 1.5. N2 is the refractive index of air, which is 1. And flat surface, the radius of curvature of a flat surface is infinite. Therefore, R is equal to infinite. So we are using P2 and I2 for the flat surface. So our P2 is now 24 centimeter. I is equal to I2, which is our image distance. So therefore, N1 by P2 plus N2 by I2 is equal to N2 minus N1 by R. That gives us 1.5 by 24 plus 1 upon I by 2, that is equal to 0. That gives us I2 is equal to minus 16. That means that D is 16 centimeter. So the answer is 16 centimeter. So the distance D at which the ray crosses the optical axis is 16 centimeter.